Hi, I'm Preston Woolheater up in Lanesville, New York, otherwise known as Siberia right now. And we're going to do a little video of some fly tying here for the Catskill flies. I've been tying flies since I was 10 years old, which is now a little over 50 years. I still love to do it. It's a great hobby and keeps me busy during the wintertime when I can't do anything else. And you know, you make a couple of bucks for yourself, a little bit extra pocket money. But you have to love to do this thing, otherwise you wouldn't be able to do it as long as I did. You have to have a passion for it. So my little history is I grew up in a little hamlet of Mount Tremper, not too many miles from here. And I was fortunate enough to live next to a very famous fisherman and fly tyer, Ray Smith. And he took me under his wing and taught me how to tie flies when I was 10. I started selling flies to Folkerts back in Phoenicia when I was 12 or 13. And back then flies weren't worth very much, about 25 cents a piece. And that's where it all started. And I still tie for a few local stores around the area today. And that keeps me going through the winter. I tie for Olives down in Shokan. I tie for Young's out in Prattsville. And there's a new store just opened up in Fleischman's Fins, Feathers, and Steel, I think is the name of it, or something like that.
Well, that's good. I'm glad it's not Fins, Feathers, and Furs.
No,
I'd be in trouble.
Pretty close to that. And that's owned by John Hoko, who's been pretty prominent fly fisherman. And my other store that I tie for a lot is Del Sports up in Margaretville. And he keeps me pretty busy, so. And he's not even a fishing store, he's a gun store. But it's a lot of good fishing up in that area too, up on the East Branch of the Delaware. Just like we have here on the Esopus and all the tributaries. And when the Esopus isn't running muddy due to the portal, it's really good fly fishing. And it's starting to come back. It was not that good for quite a few years because of all the hurricanes and floods that we had, kind of washed out all the insect life. But it's coming back. And so is fly fishing. It's really becoming a big thing again, so. When I was a kid, I remember fishing in Mount Tremper, down by the old Green Bridge. I'd go down there at night, and there would be old Kenny Umhay, there would be Jerry Klein, there would be Jerry Byron, there would be Ray Smith, and we all just seemed to gather at that place down there a lot during the summer nights fly fishing, and fly fishing was really, really good back then. The fish actually boiled out of the water back then. And you don't see that today for some reason, I don't know why. The fish are in there. I've had many good nights down there on the Esopus, not all of them, but I had a few of them last summer and a few the summer before, where in a couple hours I caught at least 30 fish and threw them all back. With fly fishing, that's the beauty of it. You don't deep hook them, you hook them right in the lip all the time, so you don't hurt the fish. Okay, what we're going to tie here is one of my favorite flies that I use, primarily on the Esopus, called the AuSable Wulff, which was originated by Fran Betters up on AuSable Wulff in the Adirondacks. And just a little tip for everybody, a good thing for picking up hooks is take one of your scissors and magnetize them. You can pick your hooks up a lot easier that way. I'm going to make the AuSable on a size 12 today. I'm going to use a little white calf tail for the wings. This is a hair stacker, which you have to use to get all the ends of the hairs even. Now I use a hockey puck to bang it against. For the last, I don't know how many years, I would use my hand. And now I can feel the arthritis coming in my hand, so I don't do that anymore. So it kind of evens the ends of the feathers, the hairs out, so they're all nice and even. You can take this fly down the Esopus in summertime, middle of July or August, throw it right out in that white water, right in that foam, and watch them big rainbows come up after it. You'll catch rainbows right out of that white water, 14, 15 inches long, a lot of times. Some nice rainbows in that water, don't let it fool you. Yeah, we'll put this, normally don't use this kind of stuff for the tail, but it makes it float a little better sometimes. I'll put a little wax on here for the dubbing to stick to. This is beaver dubbing, dyed March brown color. Okay, now we're ready for the hackle. Now with these feathers here, we have to size them with a hackle gauge because it's hard to tell looking at them what size you got. Okay, there's a size 12 right there. And we have to have a grizzly to go with this, so I'll just grab one off the table. Once again, we got to size this one too. Okay, that's a 12 also. Okay. Tie the hackles in. And then we're going to wind. You don't even have to use hackle pliers with these feathers, they're so long. Got a lot to hold on to. Now we're ready for the whip finish. And there it is, the AuSable Wulff, ready to go. Hopefully we'll be fishing with this in a couple of months. Just to give you a little overview here, this is a blue dun saddle here, which ties like Quill Gordons and blue duns and Hendricksons. This is a grizzly saddle, which is used on a lot of flies, usually mixed in with a brown or other colors or a ginger to tie like Adams or AuSable Wulffs. This is a light ginger to make light Cahills, light, let's see, what else? No, we don't make light Hendricksons. We make pale evening duns and things like that with the lighter color flies. And this is a brown used on a lot of flies that we make Coachmans, Royal Wulffs, dark Cahills. And the way the whole thing evolves with flies, they start out the darker, you use a darker color fly in the springtime. Then as summer progresses, you shift towards a lighter color fly. So come July and August, you're using a lighter color fly like this. Then it actually starts shifting back a little bit, where you start using blue-winged olives in like August and September on a really small size hook, like an 18 or a 20. So every color is very important to the whole scheme of things with fly tying. This is another very popular fly I make for up on the East Branch of the Delaware, called the East Branch Caddis, and it works very well up there. Never really had much luck with it on the Esopus, but up on the East Branch, it's a killer. This is one thing that I got from Ray Smith after he died. These are his hackle pliers that he had made for him, and they're unlike any other hackle pliers you get out there today. They're very, very stiff, and they hold the feathers very well. And I've had these since I was about 18 years old. Okay, now we're going to tie another one of my favorite flies, which I probably catch more fish on than anything, called the Leadwing Coachman. It's a wet fly. Represents the Isonychia fly in the stream. You can fish with this fly from April to November and catch fish with it all the time. Little brown chicken feather on the tail. Next thing I'm going to use is this very fine copper wire, like hair. But what this does is it helps hold the peacock body from falling apart, because once the fish start biting into their body with their sharp teeth, the peacock body starts to unravel if you don't reinforce it with something else. We're going to use some peacock for the body. Drop those. I have another pair of scissors. Okay, now we're going to turn the fly over and put some legs on it. Same feather we used for the tail. Now, put some wings on it. Okay, so now we're going to put wings. We're going to use mallard wings, mallard quill for the wings. Got to have a left and a right. One from the left wing of the duck and one from the right wing of the duck. Hardest part with fly tying is to try to get the feathers do what you want them to do. This one feather's got a little curl to it. We'll figure it out. Okay, we got the wing on there, and we're just going to tie it off. Put a little glue on it, hold everything together. And we have the leadwing Coachman wet fly ready to go. And it will catch a lot of fish. Just to show you a little bit where fly tying in general has evolved over the last 50 years. When I first started tying flies, this is what we had to work with. These were Indian necks, they were called. They actually came from India. And you were lucky if you got 20 flies or 30 flies out of a neck. Today, through genetics, I buy my feathers out at a place in Colorado called Whiting Farms. Dr. Thomas Whiting, who's a geneticist out there, figured out how to make these beautiful feathers on these chickens so long. And one of these flies, I can get sometimes a dozen or more flies out of one feather. And his feathers, the problem with them is he breeds them for very small size flies, where years ago the small size feathers were way down here. So now you have this thing, if you're into small flies, it's great, but I tie a lot of bigger flies, like 12s and 14s. But now they seem to be getting into that more too, because more people are asking for it. So a lot of these feathers here will tie size 12s and 14s. And the hackle is very, very stiff, and the stems are very, very fine. You never have to worry about them rolling over. And Thomas Whiting has got it down to a science. And since the feathers are so long, hanging off the chicken, they didn't want the feathers to drag on the ground, so he bred the chickens through genetics to have legs about that long. So the feathers wouldn't drag on the ground. He's a genius. Right, the next fly we're going to tie is a pheasant tail beadhead nymph. And for that, we're going to need to put a bead head on. And what the bead head does two things. It weights the fly down to get it down where a nymph needs to be, down near the bottom. And it also acts like an attractor, so the fish can actually see the fly from further distances. And this is a very effective fly. What we're going to use for this is a pheasant tail out of a ringneck pheasant, cockbird. We're not going to cut this off. We're going to leave it there because we're going to use it for the wing case. Next thing, we're going to put some peacock on it. And put another one in there. That one's not big enough. Let's see, there's two different ways of doing this. You can do it this way, and do it this way. On this fly, you can do it a different way. Put legs on her now. Nice thing about nymphs, the rougher they look, the better they work. Oops. Okay, put some glue on that to hold it together. Any of these hairs sticking out to the side like that, just leave them alone. Okay, there you have your pheasant tail beadhead nymph. This is a wonderful book. Anybody interested in learning how to tie flies or are tying flies or fly fishing just in general, the Tying Catskill Style Dry Flies by Mike Valla. In this book is the nice article of Ray Smith, the fellow that taught me how to tie flies, and a lot of good pictures and some good writing about Ray. There's the desk I learned how to tie at, the bobbin I tied with. This picture here, I believe, was taken in the Chichester Stream right across from the Phoenicia school. I think my grandfather took that picture, if I remember right. Smith used to guide a lot of famous people back in his day. There was a rumor that I heard that he did guide Babe Ruth a couple of times fishing up here in the streams on the Catskills. There's a couple articles here about Ray Smith. This is from a 1972 Outdoor Life magazine. And there's Ray there at his desk where I learned how to tie flies, right there. Over here is an article that was in the Catskill Mountain News that Dave Boudin of Dell Sports made me a copy of about me tying these special flies for him up there. I'm mentioned right down in here.
On average, how long does it take you to tie a fly?
It takes me approximately 3 to 4 minutes to tie a fly, depending on the fly. Some flies are a little more intricate and have a few more different steps to them than others. But there are a couple flies that I can tie in less than 3 minutes, but I usually don't go that fast anymore, so I'm not in that much of a hurry. It's just I don't even realize I'm doing it after a while. I don't even have to think about it. Because when I sit there and tie a fly, I'll sit there and get out all the materials and tie maybe 100 flies of one color, one style, one pattern, one size. Then I move on to the next one.
Do you remember the first trout you caught on one of your own flies that you tied?
I don't remember that. I remember the very first fly I ever tied with Ray. It was a dark Cahill, that I do remember. But I don't remember the first trout I caught.
It must be a special feeling to do that, though, to know that you were able to fool a trout with your own creation.
Well, that's what I think got me hooked in the first place, was to be able to build something yourself and use it to go out and fool a trout. Because that meant a lot to me, and it still does.
Yeah.
Because I can sit here and tie a fly, a certain pattern, and think where I have fished with this fly and had good success with it over the years. And the flies have changed a lot. They've evolved, where years ago wet flies used to be a big thing back in the 70s and the 60s. And they're not so big anymore. Nymphs have kind of taken over that. But I'm trying to force people on wet flies, and I tie a 3-fly wet fly leader, which we did back in the day. And there's only a couple of people alive today that I know that know how to make those, including me. But they used to be really effective, and there were times you'd catch 2 or 3 fish at one time with those.
And do you sell them at the same stores where you sell your flies?
I sell those at the same stores where the other places buy the flies, usually, yes. They're a little hesitant at first to try them, so I said, here's a couple of them, try them, see how you like them. If you like them, then you can buy some. And they've been going pretty good, but you have to explain to people how they work. And what's good thing about them is, even if you don't have a fly rod and you don't know how to fly fish, you take one of those leaders, put a split shot or 2 in between the flies, and use it on a spinning rod, and you can cast it out, and you'll catch fish with it. But it's a very relaxing thing after coming home from a stressful day at work, where I have to use my mind all day, and I come home here, and I just put my music on, put my headphones in, and I'm in another world. I don't even have to think about it. I enjoy it that much.
What follows is for my daughters Joanne, Christine, and Patricia, and is an excerpt from a recording of the June 8th, 1938, 8 p.m. Fred Allen radio show, Town Hall Tonight, on which their grandfather, Ray Smith of Phoenicia, New York, appeared as the guest Catskill Mountain sportsman, hunting and fishing guide, fly tyer, and raconteur. Dad often guided many of the regulars on the show, including Fred, his wife Portland Hoffa, and the members of the Town Hall Quartet, namely Tubby Wyatt, Len Stokes, Ken Christie, and Bob Moody. The Town Hall Tonight recording was provided by my good friend and good friend of my father's, Mr. Terry Finger, originally of Saugerties, New York, and now of Columbia, Missouri.
Our guest tonight, Andre, has spent his entire life up in the woods. He's an expert guide and an authority on matters that concern the Nimrod and the amateur manipulator of rod and reel. And so tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I know you didn't expect to meet that man about trout and deer, Mr. Ray Smith. Good evening, Ray.
Good evening, Fred.
Ray, the boys tell me in raucous tones that you are a combination Isaac Walton and a domestic Frank Buck.
Well, if you're talking about hunting and fishing, Fred, that's my business.
But tell me, Ray, where do you do your hunting and fishing?
Around Phoenicia, New York.
Phoenicia?
Yes, it's up in the Catskills.
Well, I thought the Catskills were so overrun with tourists and social directors these days that the only game left up there was pinochle.
But you can bag plenty up my way, Fred.
Well, I don't really know much about the country, Ray. The nearest I've ever come to really getting into the woods was the summer I spent 2 weeks helping a window dresser at Abercrombie and Fitch's. But say, how is the fishing around Phoenicia?
Best in the country, Fred. Our waters are stocked with 100,000 trout each year.
100,000 trout.
Haven't you ever been trout fishing, Fred?
Well, no, Ray. I've never fished for trout. What bait do you use? Worms or old mandolin pigs?
No, the expert used only artificial flies.
Well, couldn't you use real flies?
We could if we could catch them, Fred, but it's harder to catch the flies than it is the trout.
Well, if the real flies are too quick for you, naturally you'd have to use a substitute. Well, do you make your own artificial bait?
Yes, Fred, I tie about 12,000 flies a year.
12,000 flies. You know, that's more than the Brooklyn outfield will drop this season. But you don't use up 12,000 flies alone, surely?
No, I sell them.
Well, that's fine. I'm glad to know that. If I ever need any, I'll certainly get in touch with you.
Well, you can write me in care of Wagner's Sporting Goods Store, Phoenicia, New York.
I'll write that on my cuff tonight. Wagner's Sporting Goods Store. How many trout do you think your flies fool annually, Ray?
Well, I don't keep books, Fred, but I guess thousands of them.
You know, I often say a fish is like a bad actor. If he keeps his mouth shut, he'll never get the hook. Big do trout run up your way?
Well, they come as high as 7 pounds. The
7
biggest trout I ever caught was 6 pounds 10 ounces.
Well, is it true that some fish are foxier than others?
Absolutely. They get smarter as they grow older.